Hello, everybody. It's Wine Wednesday. I'm Kevin Addix. Welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here. We've got a very, very cool guest to have on. We've up to this point been talking with winemakers and folks who are involved directly in the craft of wine. And today we've got someone extremely special, a good personal friend of mine, Al Spoler. Al, welcome.
Hi there, Kevin.
So Al is, in addition to being the wine competition director for the Maryland Wineries Association, so he runs our two competitive wine showcases each year. He's also co-founder, co-host of WYPR's Cellar Notes, which is a wine radio show out of Baltimore, but you can find that online, and I would certainly go digging for it. And then, of course, he is a broadcast personality, so he's got experience in production and hosting at Maryland Public Television and beyond. So, Al, very thrilled to have you here.
I'm really glad to be here, Kevin. It was funny, last night, Maryland Farm and Harvest had a rebroadcast of the show where I went out to Black Ankle and visited out there. So it was a lot of fun to see that.
And so you are one of the hosts of Farm to Harvest.
Yeah, Maryland Farm and Harvest, and we're in our 8th season right now. And
pretty incredible. I remember when that was first conceived, and I think the shows are available on demand now.
Absolutely, you can see all 8 years.
So if you don't know this show, you need to know this show because it's covering all the different farms and aspects of food production and all around the state. And you have found, I don't know who's doing the scouting, but you guys find the most amazing locally grown products, which is so cool.
We all do. We all keep our ears open and our eyes open and look for stories. And when you think about, 4 or 5 stories per show, 13 shows a year, we've done quite a few. We've been to every single county in Maryland, and we're still turning up new stuff. It's really great. And I love doing the show. The production values are extremely high. And Joanne Clendenning is just a great host. So we have fun doing it, and it is very, very educational. And the one thing I think that I love doing more than anything else is putting a spotlight on Maryland farmers and Maryland agriculture, because it is so important to this state. And we are getting just tremendous support from the public out there. Lots of people really, really are embracing this whole concept of buying local. And that includes local wines.
Well, and that does include local wines, which is the I suppose that's the topic of the day. So,
right.
What first brought you to Maryland wine? Because you had been doing the show for many years prior, correct?
No. My interest in Maryland wine goes back to the 1970s.
Okay.
And it was in the late 70s I became interested in wine, just because we needed something to drink at dinner. And I started kind of getting serious about wine. I started from nearly the very first bottle. I started keeping notes about it and tasting notes and trying to learn more and more about it. And eventually, I realized that I didn't have to go out to California to visit a winery. We had wineries here in the state. Bordy was right down the road. So I remember the first time I ever went out to Bordy, and I just thought it was fantastic. And I remember how the vineyards used to look, and Rob DeFord would confirm this, that they were pretty jungly back then. Canopy management was a concept that they hadn't fully grasped at the time. But the vines sure were healthy. They were growing like crazy. Can't hear you.
Yeah, rookie here on mute.
Okay.
So you mentioned the 70s and getting started back then. I didn't get interested in wine until the mid 90s, and I mean from the 70s to 90s, you must have seen an incredible evolution.
Absolutely. When I first started going to the Maryland Wine Festival, I think there were about 9 wineries, something like that. Right. And I remember the Governor's Cup competition was held in a kind of a little building there, and a bunch of guys sitting around tasting wines. And I thought, oh my God, they're really, getting down with this and, trying to find the best wine, and they would find the best wine and give it a big cup and everything. So I just thought that was fascinating. And slowly over the years, I began to meet the winemakers, the original bunch of people that were making wine here, and become friendly with them. And I was able to follow what was going on up close. And initially, back in the 70s and early 80s, I would have said, that every winery made at least one good wine. And some of them were quite good. I remember the old Bird Vineyards. Their 1982 Merlot was the first really great wine I tasted from Maryland. And I was so impressed that it could be done. And then I kept seeing specific examples from different wineries. I know Elk Run, Bordy, Fiore, Bassignani, Woodhall. Every now and then I get a really good bottle from them, and I thought, something's going to happen. And then I remember back in about 1990, Kevin, I think we had a really good vintage that year, and it was sort of one of the first tipping points. We were up to about 12 wineries at that point, and I noticed this kind of all of a sudden increase in quality, and that was really, really encouraging. And that a little bit, couple years later, is probably when I ran into you.
Right.
You're a grad student at Royal, I think. And I remember we got together and we shared some bottles of wine. It was really fun. But it's been a tremendous story to follow, and to see the progress that's been made. I would say the big tipping point of Maryland wine history was when Black Ankle opened up, and it was about 2005.
Yeah.
And they did things differently. They thought outside the box, and they established that if you treat Maryland more like a European vineyard rather than a California vineyard, you're probably going to do a lot better. And it was a change of mindset. And they weren't proselytizing or anything. They just, established where they thought made most sense to them. But a lot of people watched to see what was happening, and I think it had a profound influence. After that, they started coming faster and faster and faster. When we did the little TV show Chesapeake Wine Country, I think it was about 2009. Hugh Sisson and I. There were 27 wineries, and we managed to get them all into that one show, one way or the other. And we thought that was a lot. And Kevin, I used to joke with you that every time I picked up the phone and talked to you, there'd be two more wineries.
That's about right. That's the rate we're going. I think we're over 102 now.
Oh man, that's just inconceivable back then. But it's really something. I would say the thing that I think is most encouraging, two things. First of all, we have seen truly great wine produced here in Maryland. And I have bottles in my cellar that I could take to any wine region in the world and serve with pride. And they would stand up quality-wise to just about anything. And that's really tremendous. It means we have a very high ceiling here in Maryland. It's just a matter of people working up to that ceiling. The second thing I think is really, really encouraging is the number of young people that are getting into the business. A lot of the pioneers who started the Maryland wine industry are getting a little old, and they are trying to figure out ways of passing the torch. And we are seeing young people coming in, and that to me is just tremendous. We also have seen folks from around the world come to work here in Maryland. You and I both know a number of winemakers who are working here who aren't native to Maryland or to this region, and that means that we're really attracting some good attention. So I think it's so encouraging to see those kind of developments, and then you pair that with an open-mindedness about what you can plant and what kind of things you can make. Originally, like any wine region would have done, they kind of stuck to the Bordeaux varietals,
Right.
and a couple of the tried and true hybrid grapes that we knew would do well here in Maryland. But we've discovered that there's a lot of other things that you can plant here. I think Albarino, for instance, the Spanish white grape, has proven to do extremely well here. I've had some beautiful Albarinos, and that open-mindedness. I remember at Bordy, one of their winemakers suggested doing it. He's a Spanish guy, and Rob DeFord said, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's give it a shot." And boy, he made a great decision, because I think the Albarino is one of their most successful projects out there at Bordy. It's really fantastic. And unmute, Kevin. Unmute.
You know, I'm off this platform for 2 weeks and then I forget how to mute. Yeah, but and the Albarinos won the Governor's Cup, which is a testament to that.
Yeah.
Al, can I mention or just take you back? So you mentioned some of the young folks who are coming into the industry. We've got a lot of new wineries who are being opened by very young individuals, which is exciting for a couple of reasons. Number one, young and wine didn't used to go together, but also young people getting into farming is just an extraordinary change that we've seen over the last few years. But the most exciting aspect of all this, I love the new folks, but to have second and third generations of the same family, right? Folks who've gone off to college and are coming back saying, I actually want to be part of this. And you know, dear mom, dad, and grandma and grandpa, I think I can actually make this better. And that's been so exciting to see that unfolding.
Yeah, and the really good thing about young people coming into the business is that a lot of the hard work has already been done. So you can stand on the shoulders of giants and get kind of a leg up as you try to figure out this whole business of running a winery. So there's a lot of knowledge out there that the wineries will gladly share with you in terms of planting, in terms of winemaking. So they're not starting from scratch, which I think is something that is really important.
Well, and I also think that you mentioned Black Ankle as kind of being an industry turning point or advancement point. You know, what was interesting about that is you had two young folks, right, Ed and Sarah, coming into the industry, who had done their research and had decided, much like many others who've come in, I'm going to make great wine.
Yeah.
I think the difference was they ended up taking a lot of trips and interviewing a lot of folks and trying to narrow down. And they also had the luxury of buying property rather than having or inheriting property. So they figured out what they thought would make a great European style wine, and in terms of land and soil and aspect and slope, and then they went hunting for it.
Yeah.
And they were rather understated, but I remember the 2 years leading up to them opening, there was all of this murmuring in the industry about, you know, this new winery that was coming and the research they were doing and the experts that they were having come in to help them plant grapes, you know, Lucy Morton and folks like that, Bubba Beasley, who's out there mapping fields, and, you know, anything that they could find, this new technology, these innovative new thoughts, which actually was pretty common in California, pretty common in startups in Bordeaux. And if you went to the Piedmont region in Italy, you know, you could amalgam all these things together. But they were one of the first to bring it here and build it in Maryland. And when they opened, and their first year they won the Governor's Cup, the second year they won the Governor's Cup, it had a lot of people watching. And as you noted, they readily shared that information. And you had other folks like Sugarloaf and Bordelot and you know, other people who were coming online at the same time, employing the same Old Westminster as well, employing the same experts and knowledge. What do you think that's brought to the industry?
Oh boy. The whole key to success in winemaking is information. the more information you have, the better off you're going to be. And you need not only information about what's happening in your particular region, but it's really good to be able to acquire information from all over the world, all sorts of different ideas about how to handle things. The more options you have, I think, the better job you're going to be able to do. And the fact that we've had this information, we've had people from Bordeaux come over here as consultants and give really good advice. I know Doden has had it. Old Westminster has had folks from France, and it's just tremendous. And it's also validating in a sense, because these folks come in and they take a look at what we've got and they say, that's not bad. You've really got what it's going to take to make great wine. So all of that just points to further success in the industry.
I think, what we've seen, and you pointed to it earlier, you mentioned it, that it seemed like every time you'd call, another winery was opening.
Yeah.
What we've seen is, as new wineries have opened, all of these wineries have started at a much higher, further level than wineries 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that's not because they're better. It's because the knowledge has caught up, and the sharing is happening more, where, when you first got in, and even when I first got in, there was a real competitiveness in the industry. And while folks worked together, they weren't readily sharing new technology and new information and new innovations. And that is happening now. Yeah.
And I can't blame them. They were starting from scratch, Kevin. And I think starting a new wine region from scratch is one of the hardest things you can do. There's all sorts of things that you've got to master, from an understanding of your soil to an understanding of the law in your state, how that's going to affect things. And I think that when they had some success, they kind of held on to it, and they were glad to let you taste their wine. But when it came to those little secrets that they had worked out for themselves, they were a bit cagey about it.
Yeah. And I think that is beginning to thaw a little bit, or has thawed.
Oh yeah.
I'll note a comment that we have from Carrie Tippett that Drew Baker from Old Westminster made Wine Enthusiasts 40 under 40 tastemakers. Wow. And that's a huge, that and many other awards. We have wineries winning double golds and other things in major international competitions. But to be in Wine Enthusiast magazine, a very kind of world-renowned, world-respected publication, to have one of our members' names in it is a very, very cool thing. So I think that's a testament just to the fact that
it really is.
The industry is really moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So Al, let's jump into, before we get into the competitions, and you have a wine you wanted to try, tell me about Cellar Notes. How does Cellar Notes work? Give me an inside look into Cellar Notes.
Cellar Notes has been going on for about 23 years now, which is really pretty incredible. Hugh Sisson and I started it, and it was an outgrowth of a series of wine tastings that we had been doing for years at the old Sisson's restaurant. And one of the guys who came to just about every one of our tastings said, "Gee, you guys are good. You ought to do this on the radio." And I happened to know people at what had been WJHU, and I talked to them about it. And because I was already working in public television at MPT, I knew a good bit about how to go about selling a show and putting the show together. And it took, you have to get the talent, the people that are going to do it. So you and I, that was obvious. You had to get funding lined up. And we were able to do that. And then you had to get content lined up. And I remember when we walked into the program director's office all those years ago, we had 52 shows listed that we were prepared to do, an entire year's worth of material. But something we did that was really even smarter than that, we kind of knew that they were going to ask us to just give them a sample. So Hugh and I had prepared a little 4-minute piece on Beaujolais. And they said, "Can you do something for us?" And Hugh and I looked at each other and said, "Yeah, I'm Al Spoler, and I'm Hugh Sisson, and this is Cellar Notes." And we went on and did what was essentially the first Cellar Notes show. It was not recorded, but I think that we hit a home run, and we got the gig, and we've been doing it steadily ever since then. The thing that we always try to do, Kevin, on Cellar Notes is to find good values for people. I know that I like to find a good $15 bottle of wine.
Right.
I'd much rather have a good $15 bottle of wine than a okay $20 or $20 bottle of wine. So we're constantly on the lookout for that. We want to be the consumer's friends. Occasionally, we do look at some of the more expensive wines because there is interest in that, and people like to have wines for special occasions. So we'll mention those from time to time, and they tend to be wines that we think are going to be very, very reliable. But we try to find wines under $20 in general that are good, reliable choices. And in all the years that we've done it, no one has ever called us up or sent us an email saying, "That was a stinky wine that you recommended." So I guess our advice has been pretty good. And we try to stay fairly seasonal, and we try to rotate throughout the world to all the different wine regions in the world. And we try to do a fair amount with Maryland wines also. We don't want those ever to be forgotten because they've earned their place in the marketplace. So every 6 weeks we come up with 6 new shows, and Hugh does 3, I do 3. And I constantly have a pile of bottles on my dining room table that I've got to work my way through and take my notes and everything. And it's really been a great pleasure. We just love doing the show.
So do you taste separately?
Oh yeah, most of the time. Sometimes we'll get invited to a trade event. One of the wholesalers may have a show, and there'll be an import house that's coming in, and we'll taste a bunch of stuff together. But we'll always break it up and say, "Okay, Hugh, you concentrate on these, I'll concentrate on these others," and we divide the work that way.
That's great. Well, I've been a fan, and it was one of the things that I relied upon early in my wine tasting career. Just to hear ideas, and then I would be one of those junkies who ran out and did my best to find your wines. So
even that has evolved. We're currently working with I'm blanking on their name. Sorry.
Is it Kenilworth?
Yeah, Kenilworth.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Kenilworth Wine and Spirits. And we've set up a thing where you can go to the WYPR website, go to the Cellar Notes page, and each week's shows are there, and you can click on it and actually order the wine through Kenilworth, and it couldn't be easier because we know the people were trying to write down in their car while we were talking. And to keep traffic accidents down, we decided this would be a much better way of going about it. So it's really been very effective.
I love it. So let's jump into a little discussion about the wine competition. So you first got involved in the mid '90s, I believe. Was that right?
Yeah, I want to say about 1998.
Okay, late '90s.
Yeah, 90s.
And just give us an overview of what the competition looks like, and maybe what it looked like back then, because boy, I remember it. I got some memories from that.
It all started when, like I said, I used to go to the Maryland Wine Festival, and I'd see all these guys sitting around in one of those pavilions, tasting wine and making notes and stuff. And after a while, I had been studying wine for quite some time, I felt that, gee, I bet I could do this. I bet I could be a judge. So I called up Rob DeFord at Bordy and offered my services as a judge. And he called me back about a week later and said, I don't want you to be a judge. I want you to run the thing. So I said, holy mackerel. Okay. So we talked a lot, and we started this new approach to the Maryland Wine Festival and the Governor's Cup. I wanted to get people who were in the business, who really knew wine, whose livelihood depended on knowing and understanding wine and anticipating what the public would like. So those are the type of people I was looking for as judges. And there was a lot of retailers, a lot of wholesalers, some people working in restaurants, and also a couple well-informed ordinary citizens who had good palates and knew what they were doing. And basically, the basic part that hasn't changed is we solicit the wines come in, we get the judges together, we sit them down, we pour the wines blind. We have arranged different flights of wines, which is to say different groups of similar wines. And we collect the scores and we figure out who's won. But every year that we've done it, we've tried to modify the system, and it's never been exactly the same way twice. We're currently doing the Governor's Cup down at the Center Club, which is a fabulous venue for a wine competition. The judges love coming there. The Center Club takes really, really good care of us. They set us up in a beautiful space and everything we could ask for, nice lunch and all. And we have really gotten it kind of worked out so well that we've become extremely efficient. We're tasting usually about 150 wines a day at the Governor's Cup, and we get that done. Start about 9:30 in the morning. By about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we've done the last tasting, and we have a winner, and that's really efficient. And Kevin, I really got to give a shout out to the people that helped me in the back room, because without the backroom staff, nothing would happen. Nothing.
Yeah.
Folks are so dedicated, and they learn the system of pouring and serving the wines so quickly that it becomes so efficient. It's like a well-oiled machine. I may spend the first 45 minutes carefully telling everybody what to do.
Yep.
But after that, and you're there, you're always right next to me. You'll see it. They just learn so quickly that by halfway through the morning, it's running on its own, and everyone just is getting the wines out there, getting the glasses collected. It's really fabulous. So I got to thank my backroom staff, and I got to thank the judges. And we're constantly looking for new judges. Some people don't work out, and we don't ask them back. Other people turn out to be fabulous judges, and we're so happy to have them. And we are now getting a lot of sommeliers involved. Mm-hmm. People who have had really high level training in wine tasting. So probably about nearly half of the judges are sommeliers, and I think that's really fabulous. The one thing that we're eager to try, of course, we have to mention that we weren't able to do either competition this year because of the COVID.
Right.
It hit. We do the Comptroller's Cup and then the Governor's Cup. Excuse me. And we just couldn't, in all good conscience, convene all these people in a room for a full day and expect them to feel safe. So we'll pick it up again next year. But the one great idea and an example of how we try to evolve is you and I came up with the idea of having the technical evaluation panel. Mm-hmm. The judges, as they score the wines and everything, they're encouraged to write down their impressions, but they really don't do a whole lot of that. And the winemakers really would love to have good feedback from the competition And we said, well, look, let's have a separate panel of our best tasters, the most perceptive people we can find, and have them taste the wines, not award medals or anything like that, but look at them closely, see what makes them work, see where they fall short, give them technical advice, and have that stand as the feedback that we're sending to them. And I think that's going to be really, really extremely valuable.
It's going to be a big innovation.
Yeah, yeah, and we were all set to do it this coming September, but the COVID just hasn't gone away. So we're going to try it again in March or next spring, whenever we decide.
Yeah, whenever we can best figure out how to do it. Al, tell me, you mentioned good judges. You're always looking for good judges, and judges who aren't all that great, they don't get asked back. Maybe not. What makes a good judge versus a not good judge? What are you looking for? Obviously, without naming names.
Yeah, without naming names. When the judging is going on, I usually just walk slowly around the judging room, and I listen to comments, and I watch people, and sometimes you'll start to hear really goofy things, and you say, "Oh, I'm not so sure about that." And then you hear people saying really, really smart things, really perceptive things. We also can go back and look at the scoring, Kevin, and see if there's any obvious outliers. People that are one thing that really bugs me are people who constantly give extremely low scores to wines that deserve much better. And there's nothing we can do about it during that day, other than we kind of toss those scores out because they lie outside of, what's the word for it?
Well, yeah, I mean, they all of the scores, there's an average and a high and a low that outside of the mean.
But yeah. They're egregious outliers, whether high or low, we tend to discard, and we're hoping to go for a consensus, a strong consensus from the panel of five, each panel of 5 judges on each wine. But the good judges, first of all, they have lots of experience in tasting wines around the world. They know the difference between good and bad, and they're capable of putting their prejudices aside. One of the big examples is Chardonnay, that for years and years, you'd hear complaints about overly oaked Chardonnay, and they may be valid, they may not be. But we had to realize that it's a style, it's a winemaker's choice. And so what it really comes down to is, did the winemaker use the oak properly or not? And it's beside the point if you don't like oaky Chardonnay. You should be able to at least tell me, okay, this Chardonnay that has a pretty heavy oak treatment, did it work? Is everything in balance or not? And another thing is that some of the winemakers will come up against wines they've never tasted before. We had a Limburger a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I wasn't terribly familiar with it. And I know a lot of judges weren't. But we said, listen, taste this wine and just tell me, is it balanced? Is it well made? You get that sense that there was a lot of thought that went into it. And that worked out really well. That worked out well. So people who can keep an open mind about the wines is really good. I don't have any use for people who have vendettas, and we run into that occasionally. And I just have no. I can't deal with that. I can't deal with that. But boy, a good judge. Once you find a good judge, you really want to hold on to them.
Yeah, and we've both witnessed, folks who have very strong opinions about, and I would even say a bias. And when we catch that, we typically do a trial tasting in the beginning, where we just try to calibrate judges and just have open discussion so that everybody kind of understands where the field resides. What are the highs and lows of where this wine from a majority in the room where they think it should land. And, you know, if you're biased high or biased low, you will chat with people and say, hey, listen, you know, pull off the gas a little bit or the brake, whichever it may be. We have a question from Melissa. In your opinion, what makes a truly great wine?
That's a wonderful question. It's an obvious question, but it's still a great question to respond to. Wine should be able to provide pleasure. And if it can't do that, there's no point. The things that go into it are this: depth of flavor, balance, proportion, and the ability to express something beyond just the fact that this is grape juice that's been fermented. A wine can be a delicate little Alsatian Riesling, for instance, or it can be a heavy Shiraz from Australia. As long as it has that good balance, that good depth of flavor, complexity is tremendously important. A really well-developed aroma, really wonderful flavors, then that's going to be a really good wine. But excuse me, when a wine can produce an emotional reaction in the person that's drinking it, then you're probably in the presence of truly great wine. And it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And I can give you an example of one right here in Maryland. It was Elk Run's, I believe it's 1998 Cabernet Sauvignon from the Liberty Tavern Vineyard. Fred and Carol, his late wife, were kind enough to pour some when I had a group of people out there visiting last summer. It was one of the greatest red wines I'd ever tasted. And knowing where it came from and knowing that this wine represented the dreams of the winemakers, it was incredibly moving for me. And it just, the depth of my respect for what they had done was truly profound.
And it's amazing when you come across a wine like that, as you said, brings out an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
There are many in Maryland that have done that to me, and that I felt just exuberant about. I remember one of your shows, one of your Cellar Notes shows, you said you were tasting a Pinot Blanc, and you gushed and said, this wine is like a ballerina dancing in my glass. And I like ran off the road and turned around and went to the store and bought that wine. And, you know, there is something about some wines that's just greater than the sum of the parts. And it's wild when that happens.
It is wild. And, you know, if you're going to enjoy wine, you ought to really just let your imagination loose. And when you're tasting it, just let it summon up whatever images. I remember describing one wine as a David Niven of a wine, and another one as a Grace Kelly of a wine. And that's what the wine suggested. I don't know that everyone would come to the same conclusion, but it's really a lot of fun if you let your imagination play with the wines. When you've got a good one, just have some fun thinking about what it suggests to you. Our poor winemakers, they work so hard. Jeez Louise.
Right.
They put their heart and soul into these wines. And when they hit a home run, you got to stand up and cheer. You really, really do. And here's a really good example.
I was going to ask, is there a wine handy?
There is a wine handy. And this is something that comes to us from the port of Leonardtown, which is a very nice, fairly young winery with a very young winemaker, Lauren Zimmerman. And this is the wine that won the Governor's Cup a few years ago. It's their Barbera Reserve from 2015. I'm trying to get it there. Sorry, when
got it, yeah.
I remember that competition because Port of Leonardtown had another one, kind of the Old Line Red blend.
Yep. Yep.
And this is just allergies, folks. It's not COVID, so don't worry. But it was nip and tuck which one was gonna come away with the Governor's Cup, but the Barbera did, and it was just an absolutely stunning wine. A little background: Barbera comes to us from the Piedmont region of Italy, northwest Italy, right around the same place that Barolo and Barbaresco are grown. It's not considered as noble a grape as Nebbiolo, which makes Barolo and Barbaresco, but it ain't bad. And for years, I've been tasting Barberas like Barbera d'Asti and Barbera d'Alba that weren't all that great. But then I ended up going to Italy, and I made it a point to try to see what these Barberas were like. And I was so impressed. I fell in love with them. So I come back home, and what do we have landing on our doorstep? This beautiful Barbera from the Port of Leonardtown. And if you don't mind, I'm going to have a little taste. Wow. Wow. It's drinking very well. I've poured this for quite a few people and not told them what it was. And universally, they cannot believe that it's a Maryland wine. And I said, well, why not? Because we're capable of this kind of quality. Truth to tell, it's a little bit bigger than most Barberas that you would get from Italy, but the depth of flavor is just astonishing. And if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, this comes from a little 5-acre vineyard. That's one of the source vineyards for Port of Leonardtown, which is a cooperative.
That's right.
And the young woman who raised these vines, she confessed to me, she said, I had quite a crop that year. I had more tonnage than I wanted because, you know, the less tonnage, theoretically, the better the quality. But Lauren took those grapes and made this fabulous wine. And, you know, I'm eager to see if she's going to be able to replicate this. I don't know. I don't know if those grapes are still available or what. But boy, what a fabulous wine. And yeah, I remember tasting this for the first time, and this is one of those wines that just makes you think, man, we did that here in Maryland? Good for us. You know, this is really, really something. And this is one of those wines. Next time I go to Italy, I'm going to take a bottle with me and pour it for some of the winemakers I know there, and just see what they say, because first of all, it's more intense and deeper than a Barbera grown there. It's really more like a Nebbiolo.
Yeah. Yeah, it does have a much bigger, fleshier.
Yeah. So it's like that. And then I'll be so proud to say, well, this comes from my state of Maryland, which isn't California, it isn't Oregon or New York or anything. It's my little state of Maryland, and we can produce this. And that's just so exciting. It's really, really cool.
Al, thank you for sharing that, and that's one of my favorites as well. And I don't know that I have any bottles left. So how do you think it's drinking? You think it's got a couple years left?
Oh yeah, it's going full steam. It's really good. It's fully mature. The tannins are in a nice place. They're not overly strong. The fruit is vibrant. It's taking on some depth. And there's some mature flavors that are developing in this, and I think it's doing really well. I've got probably half dozen bottles left, so well,
nowhere to go.
One
minus one. So you mentioned Black Ankle. You mentioned Elk Run. Can you and Bordy's Albarino? Can you dive back in your memory, or are there any other wines that have really individual wines that have stood out to you, maybe in the competitions, not in the competitions?
Sure. The first Chardonnay that Old Westminster made, I still have 2 more bottles left. I just had one the other night. It was a 2013, I believe.
Yeah, I was going to say it had to be a couple years old.
Yeah. So it was pretty old for a Chardonnay. I always maintained from the very first time I tasted it that it was drinking very much like a white Burgundy,
Right.
like something from Puligny Montrachet. Maybe not a first growth or anything, or Grand Cru certainly, but like a good quality village wine from Puligny Montrachet. It had that structure. Boy, does it ever. It still has that good acidity, the good minerality, but it's gotten plumper and deeper and richer over the years. So that's one that certainly sticks on my mind. Some of the Chambourcins that I tasted from Fiori in the early years,
Yeah.
just knocked my socks off, and I was just so impressed with how seriously Mike was taking those grapes and making just a fantastic wine. Really, really lovely. Some of the Chardonnays that Sugarloaf has come up with have just been phenomenal wines. And then their reds can be phenomenal wines. Just beautiful. Knob Hall, their Cab Francs have just been so impressive. Big Cork.
Yeah.
Dave is such a good winemaker, and nearly everything he produces is just fabulous. You know, it's always just such a pleasure to taste. And you know, I don't want to. I'm leaving so many out, but Crow Vineyards.
Yeah.
My goodness, their Barbera Rosé.
Oh, it's spectacular.
Their Vidal Blanc that they make is spectacular.
How about their sparkling? I love their bubblies.
Yeah. And speaking of Vidal Blanc, we're so lucky to have that grape here in Maryland because it's so versatile, and so many winemakers have done so many things with it.
Well, can I give a plug for one?
Yeah.
So I have Antietam Creek Vineyards Vidal Blanc. This one is a 2017, and it's gorgeous. It's everything a Vidal should be. Lots of beautiful tropical and floral notes, and we've got dogs in the background.
My dog noticed.
Yeah, all dogs around the internet are jumping up. So beautiful vineyard, beautiful vines, right overlooking Antietam Battleground, and this is their Vidal. But you mentioned Chardonnay. My current love affair with the Maryland wine right now is their Chardonnay, Antietam Creek Chardonnay. It's unbelievable. So highly recommend.
My dog Archie's going to jump in front of the camera pretty soon.
Well, we'll take him. So Al, what do you think is next? Do you have a crystal ball to see what's coming?
More wineries and higher quality. I think that the word's going to get around about how to, first of all, handle the grapes in the vineyard, what grapes to be planting, how to manage the canopies, how to manage all the things that you got to do, the pruning and dropping fruit and all that, timing the picking, the harvest. That's important. Techniques in the cellar are just going to get better and better. So I foresee that. I also foresee a kind of a rush toward the sweet spot in Maryland, kind of in the center of the state, in the Piedmont region. 10 or 15 miles either side of South Mountain. We have just tremendous opportunities for vineyards to be planted there. And it seems that if something gets planted there, it's going to be good. I mean, look at Antietam Creek, for instance. There they are, right in the shadow of South Mountain. On the other side of the ridge is Burkittsville, the famous vineyard that Bourdieu is working. Knob Hall, Big Cork is just, a few minutes away. It's no accident that there's this concentration of vineyards and wineries in that region. And I predict that we will see over the next 20 years even more people coming into that region and planting the vineyards and getting good fruit there. When I look at a project like Burnt Hill, for instance, that Old Westminster is undertaking. I just have tremendous optimism about the future of the industry, because these young people went out and did a lot of research and found the best possible site for a vineyard. They had it analyzed every possible way by people who really know what you were talking about, Bubba, and some of the Lucy Morton's crew, and they did everything that they possibly could do to plant a great vineyard. And I think in another 2 years, we should have the first crush. I know they got vines growing this year. I don't know if there's going to be anything usable this year, but within 1 or 2 years, we'll have the first crush. And I'm really eager to see how that's going. I've always said, Kevin, that when you taste a bottle of wine, you're tasting the winemaker's dreams. Nobody sets out to make a lousy wine. They set out to make the very best wine that they can. And they put their heart and souls and their money into it, and a lot of work. And they're trying to do the very best they can. And the exciting thing that we have experienced here in Maryland is that we have access now to just first-rate wine, first-rate winemaking, and I think it's only going to spread and get better. I really, really do. Now, the big caveat is Mother Nature.
Well,
2018 was just a big bust of a year. All this current rain that we're having now is getting me a little bit worried. I'd like to see it dry out between now and October as much as possible. We have all the water in the soil we need. But when Mother Nature cooperates, the winemakers know what to do with it. And that's really exciting. We do get some superb vintages here, some really good growing seasons here in Maryland. And it's great to see the quality of the wine that emerges from that.
So what's next for you?
Getting COVID vaccine.
Busier than you've ever been.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting kind of old, but fortunately I have a good wine cellar to
Good.
I'm just keeping going on. We have to get the Comptroller's Cup fired up for next year and the Governor's Cup fired up for next year, and then try to keep that developing. And we still have Cellar Notes, and we still have Radio Kitchen, and we still have Maryland Farm and Harvest. So I've got those things all going. I just want to get back into circulation the way I used to, but I guess everybody does. I'm tremendously worried about my friends in the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
I know a lot of places have closed. I mean, geez Louise, it's really sad. And those places aren't coming back. Milton Inn, for heaven's sakes. Yeah. That's an institution.
That was a real loss.
It is. And people have lost their jobs. It's really a very bad situation. And I hope that the industry can snap back and recover. And it isn't really good for Maryland wine either, because we're not getting the wines into the restaurants, and that's an important part of marketing these wines. So I'm just waiting for this to get over.
Waiting for the positivity to roll around. So
yeah, get down to
that positivity, different positivity.
That's right. Testing positivity.
Well, Al, I want to thank you for joining us. It's been great to have you.
And well, it really is. And Kevin, you and I could talk for hours about Maryland wine and some of the things we've seen and tasted, and some of the people we know. It's just fabulous. And I really am so proud of the industry, because it's come so far. And I've seen it. I mean, I remember when there were 9 wineries, and they weren't much more than kind of garage operations initially. And now you point to some of the beautiful wine tasting rooms around the state, and you look at some of the beautiful vineyards,
right?
And you realize, man, fella could have a pretty good weekend touring the Maryland wines.
Oh yeah. I know it's amazing what's happened, and the investment, and your perspective has been great, because you've seen a whole lot more than much of us. You were paying attention earlier than many people. Yeah. So, well, Al, thank you, and I really appreciate you being on.
You're certainly welcome, and I hope that this has been fun for the people who've been watching it.
It indeed has. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody for being involved. And if you're into Maryland wine and you like exploring Maryland wine, we've got a very cool program that we're launching soon called the Maryland Wine Explorer. And we'd love for you to be involved, and you're going to get some amazing wines through it as well. So stay tuned for that. And with that, see you next week.